Wait, I got to put a little makeup on.
You look gorgeous just the way you are, Dan.
That's the first lie you've told today. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, we are live.
So I will turn off my video now and then if I'm running to get more coffee.
As will I. Do you want to call the meeting to order?
Yes. What do we do first? Our agenda or minutes?
Agenda.
Agenda. So before we approve the agenda, Norm wanted to talk about something on looking data. So let that be the first thing on the agenda. But given that, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Agenda approved. Motion to approve the minutes. We could get so much more done if somebody jumped in right away and make a motion.
I move to approve the minutes from the August 19th meeting.
A second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Stephanie, can you unmute Janet so we can hear her ayes and nays?
Yep. But when everyone is unmuted, there's a lot of background noise. So I've been trying to mute people when I hear a lot of background noise.
Okay.
Okay.
Norm, you're up first.
It occurred to me as I was reviewing our notes from our last meeting that we at one time talked about community engagement, and it seems like we are getting closer to being able to identify both not only strategies but also tactics that could be topics for community engagement of some type. And so I just didn't want us to lose track of that as an event we just need to schedule as part of our overall schedule. So I know we've got a jammed agenda today. MJ, I'm glad you're on today. But at some point in time, I would recommend that we talk about, as we start getting into the details of the report, we talk about how we would obtain community engagement for these parts.
I agree. And I think that's on the agenda for today. It was intended to be on the agenda. Let me, I will look, but yes, Norm.
Can you pull up the agenda?
I am going there now. So the agenda for today is community engagement, next steps, and report structure and content. Those are the two items.
I lost track of the agenda. When was that sent out?
The agenda is posted on the edinamn.gov website where the city council agendas and all those are. So you go to the government and then I post them at least 3 days in advance, but this one was posted 2 weeks in advance.
It would be helpful for me. It would be helpful for me if you could send those agendas out by email, because that's not a website that I would normally just go to every couple of days.
Okay.
Stephanie?
Yes?
So on the agenda, it sounded like you had community engagement discussion listed first. Would you like to start with that or have that second?
It's same to me. So it's up to you all. Norm, do you want to talk about it first? and Bernadette and Dan. Are you okay with that? Or do you want to make sure that we save a half an hour at the end?
Either way would be fine by me.
Either way is fine by me.
Okay.
Okay, why don't we start talking about that we'll take a pause from the report at 8 o'clock. We're getting a late start, so why don't we talk about the report for 45 minutes, talk about a community engagement, and then see where we're at with time.
Okay.
Is that okay, Merritt?
Yeah, that's fine. I just wondered
Okay.
if I can set the stage for the report discussion.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. First, I want to let you know that I sent out the report in an extremely early form, really as parts of it are still taking shape and content's being put in. There's often a debate about whether to do that. Some people feel that the first draft of the report should be pretty polished and almost look like the final report, and then it's a finer grain review. I tend to prefer to start with something that's really early, that needs a lot of work, so that you all have an opportunity for input in really helping to shape it instead of just reacting to it. What that means is what you see in front of you might resemble the final report by 20% or 30%, but it has a long way to go. And so with that in mind, I'm excited to talk with you guys about kind of reactions on, how the framework is, the topics that are sort of highlighted for there to be addressed. A couple sort of questions about policy and political tone. A couple of the sections in there were memos that my co-consultant Yana had created that we never got to share and fully talk about with the task force. We were starting to use them with the land use committee. But she was coming at those memos not necessarily thinking they'd be in the report, but wanting to use them to kind of help the task force talk through the conversation of housing policy and history in the past, and then talk about why it's important today in light of that. So it might be that some of that doesn't make sense to have in the report, or that it's shortened. I think it's, as you guys as a task force, I think the big thing you really need to decide is the report kind of jumping in based on background from before, and you're really focusing on goals and strategies and tools? Or do you want to spend time sort of setting the context for why this is important? And I think I have heard that's the case. And if you are doing that, you can do so just with data, or you can do that with, sort of a larger policy framing for housing. So those are kind of the things I want to talk through. And then also, in looking at it, Yana reviewing it, I think there's still some sorting out to do of some of the goals, strategies, and tools to make sure that they're all in the right category. So over time, we might sift a few of those to the right category, or decide that we're missing, say, a strategy, or want to re-articulate a goal in a different way. So that's my spiel.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Do you want to go through it then? I know Tom has provided some feedback and comments. Merritt did post online, because we have talked at meetings in the past year, and as we had speakers and the conversations that occurred during those meetings on, one example was there was a concern in the community that creating more housing was actually going to hurt the schools. And the conversation with the schools and the feedback that some of you received and went to other meetings, school board meetings or what all, it said actually it would improve the schools. I mean, the more students provide, the more funding, and then they can get some of the more, the budget that they need to, you know, whatever, make it so the classroom sizes aren't too large. So I wasn't part of those conversations, but there's an opportunity in those online forms that where you can add in some of the information that you have gleaned in your outside meetings to make sure that it is represented in a way that you want in this report. Because you've done a ton of work outside these group meetings, and we want to make sure that what you've learned and what you've gathered, the information you've gathered and how it applies to housing does get reflected in what has not been thoroughly discussed on these virtual meetings. So that's what the point is of those, that table or form that Merritt also put on. So if you want, we can go through that. And so, because like I said, only Tom, I think, has responded online to the draft report, and go through the table that Merritt had put up, or Merritt, you can decide how this should occur, and have you verbalize now different elements that you want to make sure that get added or included or taken out or whatever from her list that she has prepared. So I don't know if you want to share that, Merritt, or do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead and share that. I think before we jump into the point by point, I would like to hear, for people that had a chance to start reviewing it, any of you that have done that, just sort of a high level couple of things that jumped out to you when you looked at it. And please be honest, because this is the time for us early to, you know, make the report represent something that feels comfortable for all of you. So, Tom, do you want to start, since we know you read it because you already put in comments? You're on mute, I think.
I think a lot of my comments were just little additions. I don't think they were, or just kind of little picky yeah, just picky little stuff. But I did think that, as Stephanie pointed out, I think we need to have a more robust discussion about the schools, because that is something that is very sensitive topic for a lot of people. And with open enrollment, you have almost 15% of the student body that comes from outside the school district. And even if you accommodate all the residents of Edina that live outside the school district, you still have plenty of room. It would be more impact for people that actually live in, say, the city of Bloomington or Minneapolis. There was just one area about impact fees, and that was kind of a very sensitive discussion for city staff. That was long before Merritt came on board. So that might be something that you want to address. And the other things were just, I would say for the most part, they were just little things, or just a little clarification I would have liked to add here and there. I think the definition area needs to be more developed, or additions put into it.
Sorry, which section did you just say?
The definitions. Under some of the definitions, I
Okay.
made some additions and corrections, or additions, I'll say, and listing subsidies. We had developed a longer list earlier on, and I tried to send that to you. To be honest, I'm not having much luck with the document or the Google Docs. It may be beyond my technical abilities.
Yeah, I was looking through some of the folders yesterday for some of the things I remembered seeing, and I did find that one, and I forwarded it to Yana, who's been working on the tools section.
Okay, so anyhow, so I just attached a couple of documents that we had
Okay.
done earlier.
Yep.
So, and just a clarification about some of the comp plan, what that is all about. It's approved by the city or almost approved, and it was required by the state. And the Maxfield study was commissioned by the city of Edina. So, you know, and there were a few things under strategies where a couple of points to clarify or add, but I hope my comments came through on the, because I'm learning a lot of technology going through this volunteer thing. And so, I mean, I thought it was a good start, and I realized that from the goals, we'll go on to strategies and tools and tactics as we evolve. So I thought it was a good start. Oh, the other thing is I think the 1800, the goal of 1800, it would help if we broke that down by subcategories, because some people, if they see 1800, they may think it's all going to be
Right.
one population. But if they see, okay, there's going to be elderly, there'll be workforce housing, there might be some housing for disabled people. At least some of the subcategories that might be more sympathetic to, and a better understanding of who's actually going to live in that housing. So I think that's important. So
Okay.
that's all I have to say.
I think that's a good idea. Who wants to be next?
I am now having technical difficulties and I can't pull up the document, Merritt, because I had to sign in as my colleague in order to get the YouTube stream going, in which case I have lost my access to my Google Doc.
Okay. So would you like me to pull up the full report or the content section?
Which one would be most helpful to you?
Well, I can, I think the full report probably.
Okay.
So I will go ahead and do that. So you want me to do share screen?
Well, if we're going to go through it.
Yep. Okay.
Unless, wait, let me, is it in the work, let me see, the meeting materials?
Yeah.
Right, because I got one, it's not updates, it's the draft 2 of 8 for edits. See, yeah,
That's good.
available.
Okay. I'm trying to do you have to give me permission to share content?
Yeah, it won't let me in it. It's locked.
I'm hitting share content, but nothing's happening.
Okay.
How
Sorry,
many
guys,
of you are able to pull? How many of you are able to pull it up right now for reference?
To pull up the housing goals and strategies?
No, her
So
draft.
pull up the draft 2 of 8 for edits that I'd sent a link to.
I have a paper copy in front of me.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I use the link, it says I need permission to open it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so send me a note and that should pop up in my inbox. and then I can give you permission.
Okay.
So Stephanie, do you see anything where you can give me permission?
Yep.
Oh, is it 2 pages?
No, it's much longer.
38 pages, Dan.
It's like 2, a little more. Okay, so I get sorry, unable to open the file at this time. Please check the address and try again.
Eric, did you see my request? I got an access
Yeah.
denied. Okay.
Yeah, so did I.
So did you see, I just tried to resolve that for each of you. Do you see that? That you can get in now?
Nope. Oh, because I'm signed in as Scott Denfield.
No, I just gave permission to Scott Denfield.
Oh. I think. Sorry about this, guys. It's not going to work because hosting this program. It's a kink that I have to work with on IT. Can you email it to me?
Mine still doesn't let me in either.
I just don't, I'm sorry, I just don't understand this because I set it all up so that you guys are editors.
I think it's on my Gmail. I'm like, because I use the Google Drive with a Gmail account, and you probably have like one of my work email accounts that I don't use on my Google Drive. So then I just send a request through Bernadette Hornig at Gmail so I could save it to my Google Drive, but I still can't log in.
I have Bernadette Hornig at gmail.com.
Yeah. So the link doesn't work for
Okay,
me.
so,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So the link doesn't work for me, but if I go to the documents, is it in the meeting folder for today?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes,
there's two documents in the meeting folder for today, right?
There's 3.
Right.
One
Okay,
says goal
see,
August.
Okay, that's it. I only see 2. I see goals and strategies, which is a Word doc, and then I
Yep.
see an Excel doc, August 5th,
Yep.
2020. I
Yep.
don't see the 3rd doc.
The 3rd doc is draft 2 of 8 for edit, and that one is the one that appears locked.
Okay, I'm going to ask, right now, I am going to make a
But if you-
copy. Oh, go ahead, Stephanie.
I was going to say, if you email it to me, I can share the screen.
Yes, that's what I'm working on right now.
But Tom, is who here reviewed it? Had time to review it? Okay. Norm, what were your initial reactions?
I know writing a report like this is very difficult. And I was pleased to see how much progress had been made on it. So I can only appreciate how much work it's going to take to really make this a document that really reflects all of our thinking. Interesting to get the first impression when you read a document, and this may not be truly fair, but there were certain sections in the report that I felt were written negatively. And when I think about all the discussions that we have had about housing in Edina, they've been extremely positive. And I think we would all agree that the city has been able to accomplish a lot. We've got a very, very high quality of housing. And there were times in the document that I think things could be described two different ways. One way would be to say we've got a great city, and there's been a lot that's been accomplished so far. And the intent of this report is to build on that and make it even better and serve the needs of new people that are going to be moving in. In some parts of the report, for example, on page 5, the middle paragraph, the stability and deep bonds that build a healthy community begin to fray. One could look at things that way, or one could talk about the importance of change and continuing to meet needs of a changing community. Now,
Yes, it's very well stated.
Yeah, that's terrific. And that's the kind of thing, especially because you had a nice language alternative, that I would love to see people, put those kind of notes in the report. Because I'll always have another copy. So this draft that I put in the meeting folder is intended for you guys to just actually go in and write a comment. What you do is you pull down the pencil, and we'll show you this in share screen, and then you do suggestions. Because part of what I really like about that is when you guys include specific language, then I start to get a nice flavor for the voice you're looking for as a task force, like you say, the way you're sort of the tone, I guess, and making that true to what you want the report to be.
I received it. If you want me to share screen, yep, I can share screen.
Okay.
Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So do you want to walk through this, Merritt?
Yeah.
Stephanie, can you email that out to us all right now?
Yep.
Thank you.
So I think I did just send you all an email too, so hopefully it's in all your boxes now.
Okay.
So Stephanie, what we can see in your share screen right now is your
me
email.
emailing it out. Okay. I will, because I There we go. Sorry about that. I wanted to make sure they got it.
Okay. Can people see this, that their size on the computer? Should Stephanie zoom in?
Zoom in.
Okay. Norm, while we're zooming in, were there other sort of initial comments you had?
Oh, I think that's the most general comment that I would have.
Yeah.
I've got
Great.
comments, and perhaps as we go through page by page, I'll be happy to share some of those thoughts.
Okay. All right. So here we start with the table of contents. Housing for people, health, and prosperity. Why don't you go into the body of the report?
I'm going to make this 150. It's too big.
So I started just by stating the principles with a short intro paragraph. This will be the next page.
Could we go back to paragraph 2 on the executive summary?
Sure. Yeah.
Statements in here that jumped out at me that that seem to be out of phase with things that conversations that I've had with our task force members and with outside members. For example, in paragraph 2, the last statement, talking about the demographics and housing needs of the population over time, they've grown disconnected from regional trends in household type, housing sought, and housing affordability relative to wages.
Yep.
And that struck me because I don't think that that's really correct. I think when I think about the housing trends in the metropolitan area, I think that Edina is very much in sync with housing trends, and witness to that is the demand for people who want to live in Edina, and the ability that Edina has had not only to maintain a very strong single-family housing base, but also to build the capability for multifamily housing and a variety of housing types. Now, there's always more work to be done, but I would like to see us celebrate the accomplishments in the executive summary. So I look to everybody else. Am I out of sync here, or does that make sense?
Totally agree with you.
I think there's two totally different thoughts going on here. One is the desirability of housing in Edina, and certainly that has continued to be very strong. Then the other one is captured in the last note here, which is housing affordability, and particularly relative to wages. And there is a disconnect. Edina has become more expensive and fewer people can afford to live in Edina. So we sort of have two different realities going on.
I agree with Steve. The affordability relative to wages, that is a phenomenon that affects the entire country. But Edina is definitely higher.
But I don't see how it's disconnected from regional trends. That's a regional trend. Housing affordability relative to wages is a problem across the region. I mean, it may be more acute in Edina just because the housing is more expensive. But I mean, that's a problem because housing is growing at a steady rate. And for many people, wages are remaining flat or actually real dollars going down. So that's a national and a regional trend. So I don't think painting Edina as an exception to the rule is accurate, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I agree with Norm's comment that it's like, I feel like we're trying to create drama that isn't there. I mean, it's like Edina is an example of problems that are, or I shouldn't even call it problem, like situations that are everywhere in the metro.
So I think that what I was trying to capture here, what I think is in the data, but I'll go through it again, is what you said, Bernadette, that the problem is more acute. So Edina absolutely is experiencing the same regional and national trends as far as, the housing affordability becoming very challenging because the costs of building are higher. But Edina, the value of the homes has been rising faster relative to most other communities in the metro. And I don't know that the housing type isn't diversifying as quickly as communities sort of similar distances from the downtown. but I will look up data and that stuff. Even if there is, even if that's happening, I think it's still relevant, though, what you guys have been saying about the framing. You know, how is that presented, and not to present it in a way that seems sort of scolding or like Adina's, you know.
I would like to add that instead of saying the homes, sometimes we should talk about the land values, and that was one of my comments in paragraph 3. It doesn't cost much more to build a house in Edina than it does in Lakeville. It's just that the land is so much more expensive. And that is something we should note, not just because it's labor or materials, but it's the land.
Okay.
Merritt, I've got a couple follow-up questions to you. So I'm not as bothered by the tone, but the implication. So what would it be? You know, are you implying that every community should advance at the same rate? What is connected to regional trends? I know what you mean by disconnected, but what would Edina look like if it was connected to regional trends?
Right. So let's just say, for theory of this point, if the data did show that relative to other communities in the metro, all of its housing is tending to become more expensive faster than other communities, and that its housing stock by type of housing isn't as mixed as other communities, and that has been growing.
The mix has, let me stop you there. The first one was the value increasing quicker. The second one was the mix is what?
The mix of like how many are single family, duplex, apartment, condo. But I think you go back to your question, which you've asked throughout the task force, which is a really relevant question. Does Edina or any other community in the metro need to provide housing that is meeting the shifting trends in the region, or do communities kind of get to be what they are naturally, or what the market is driving them to?
I would say in what you said there, your implication is that if communities went about their own way and grew, somehow they're either contributing to the problem or not solving the problem. And I take issue with that.
Okay. Well, I think that
Hey, stop here for a second. Okay, stop for a second. Someone's making some background noise, and Merritt's the most difficult person to hear because of her connection. So when she talks, if you could make sure you mute, that'd be great. Go ahead, Merritt.
Yeah. How about we just start by, I'll see what data we can find, and then I just invite everyone to think about that. You know, what is the role of a city in a region for meeting housing need across the region?
Okay, and then one more thing. Is there a reason I cannot open this file as formatted? I just get it as a text. Does that mean anything to any of you? So when I print it out, it's just a text. It's not the format that's in the file.
Wow.
Looking. Okay.
Maybe I do not know.
Okay.
Well, what's odd is that you know, that some of you are able to access it and say print it out in a format, and then others aren't. And
Yeah.
I welcome anybody who themselves or they know someone that's really great at these things to chat with me offline about how I can make it easier.
But your effort is appreciated.
I've never been a fan of Google Docs myself, but you know, I'm trying. Norm?
Merritt, I would like to extend this conversation just a little bit to say that instead of saying that Edina is disconnected from regional trends, I would like to see us talk about how we should be celebrating the progress that Edina has made.
Okay.
The fact that our land values are high it seems to me is a function of supply and demand. First of all, we're totally built out, and second of all, there is a high demand of people who would like to live in Edina, and that indeed is driving up housing values, which is not a bad thing. And the area that I think should be celebrated is the ongoing efforts that have been taking place. Certainly, members of this community have been very active this task force have been very active in seeking ways of providing affordable housing. And the whole intent throughout our task force report is around affordable housing and meeting the needs of a wide variety of housing preferences. So instead of saying we're out of step, I think it's important to put a positive tone to this and talk about how we're celebrating the work and dedication of a lot of people in Edina towards meeting the needs of a wide variety of people.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I think it is important to celebrate, but this is to the best of our ability trying to be futuristic. So that is what we're trying to look forward. So the trend has been keeping with our current housing, but futuristically, how would that look like? Because it's going to be different. And COVID definitely has changed a lot of things that we're going to wrestle with going forward. So.
Others, or just on this point, or should we move on? Okay. Heading down. Okay, so this is the section housing for people, health, prosperity. You know, I'm kind of grabbing titles. Again, all of this is up for grabs. So I start just this first page by stating the principles that the task force agreed to and just saying, you know, principles these principles create the foundation for everything else in the report. And those are just placeholder pictures. They need to get, they're as close as I could find in 30 pictures I happen to have access to at the moment. So the cupcakes represent different flavors, which is housing choice. Anyway, so keep going. All right, so now we come to the community drivers section. I try to do an intro here that talks about relationships between them, kind of at a high level. And then if you scroll down, I imagine that perhaps what might make sense is to grab out some of the key things we talk about housing having in a relationship with, like jobs, schools, transportation, retail and services, strong neighborhoods. And so right now, these are sort of placeholders for these different topic areas. I'm going to look for data and maybe some quotes, but I want to make sure that this section, as we craft it, matches what you guys were wanting to do with this section. So, you know, a number of you had felt really strongly it was important to do the community drivers. So any initial comments? Otherwise, I just say that
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in on Joe's behalf. I'm sure if Joe were here, he would point out that there were 4 community drivers that were identified back when we were looking at the key issues.
Yeah.
And I don't see those represented here. And I'm curious where this list came from. There are things on this list that we have not discussed as a community driver in the past. So the 4 that Joe had originally identified were education, suburban to urban, quality of life, and population growth. And of those 4, I think we've got 1, which is education.
Okay. And I was trying to remember, didn't at some point you guys put together, or that subgroup put together, some kind of memo or descriptions of this topic, or was it or just high level?
And Steve, can you repeat those 2? There might be merit. Let me look.
Well, I'm just reading off of the key issues document that was originally prepared when we had identified 4 key issues. Key issue number 3 was community drivers, and it was education, suburban to urban, quality of life, and population growth for what were listed at that point as being community drivers. And as they say, I'm not married to any of those, but I just am curious how we went from that list to this new list.
Yeah. I think I did not go back and use those terms. I think I was thinking of what it seemed like the concept was capturing between these relationships. But I would like to understand better kind of what the message was on those, because when we talked about them in the past, I didn't exactly understand each of them.
I think that's a very fair comment, and I think that reflects some of the dissonance within the group about the nature of those terms. But and we don't need to spend more time on it now, but let's just make a note that we had 4 community drivers identified, and we now have a new list. We just need to work as a team to figure out which of these we think makes the most sense to put into the final report.
Right.
And I looked in my file for this community driver, and there weren't any supporting documents.
Okay. Well, I think the other, for any section in this report, we should always ask the question, how does this section provide information that helps to explain the goal, strategy, and tools that follow? Because there are lots of things you could say about housing that wouldn't directly relate to kind of creating the backdrop for the rest of the report. But it seemed like some people felt that this was an important backdrop, so I think we should probably go on, but yeah, definitely let's work on this, and particularly Joe, and who else worked on this with Joe again?
I was part of it, but because I thought that we should drop that, haven't really considered it a lot, so.
Okay.
I still like the suburban to urban because at least for people on the east side of Edina, I think that's an appealing thing that it still has a very urban feel and it's close to Minneapolis and shopping and it. So I think that's a community driver. I think that a lot of people and the attractiveness of the Edina public school system. But one thing I've noticed with this group is people have different ideas of why people buy a house or choose the kind of housing they want to live in. And, things have changed since the 70s or the 60s when some of us bought homes and raised children. And I think that we need to have in there that some people are still choosing their house on traditional values, while others are having a modern approach that they are a different approach that they may not want to have all the maintenance that comes with a large single family lot, or their lifestyle just doesn't permit them to have that kind of housing. They've got the money, but they don't choose to live that way. Just like some people choose to be renters, even though they could easily afford a condominium or a house. That I'm just thinking when the public reads this and they come with their own life experience to explain that not everybody lives the way they live and by choice. And so I think the changes that have come, we need to explain that a little bit, or just say people are looking for a wider variety of housing because they're going for a wider variety of lifestyles. Well, the way Stephanie, you wrote it, I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just that I feel that at least people on the east side of the Edina, they like that little more urban neighborhood traditional feel.
Try put it. I think some people are really upset about the urbanization of Edina, and I think some people welcome it because it makes it they see as more hip. Being able to walk to the whole debate over the restaurant at 44th and France. Is it really cool to be able to walk to your neighborhood restaurant and, go to a bistro and get a glass of wine that's walking distance from your home? Or is it urbanizing the city too much by having this population growth? So I think it's a tension.
Well,
I still think it's an attractive feature for people that lived here that there were sidewalks that actually went someplace and you could actually go to someplace on those sidewalks.
Right, but other parts of Edina, there are no sidewalks. You don't have to walk in the
street and worry about getting run over.
Right.
And I think that's been I don't think that's something new and hip. I think that's been around for a while.
Right, yeah, that's true.
So I have a question. Because most communities or all communities, Edina does have a range of opinions from people about housing, the housing that's there, the housing that they'd like to see come to the community. Is that something that the report should acknowledge, that there are a lot of different opinions? So it's kind of this, so think about people reading the report. Do you think there's value in openly acknowledging the differences and tension that communities can have around these conversations, or is there no point to doing that in the report?
I think this should be an essential. There's some background noise going on. I'm not sure where the background noise is coming from. But I think this is an essential point that should be an essential point of this report. We can say it's a negative that there's a tension, or we can celebrate the fact that we have not only a variety of different housing types that Edina is offering to prospective residents, but that it's changing at the same time. And I think that's something that we should be underlining and highlighting in this report as a positive.
I agree.
Thank you, Norm. That was terrific. That was very well stated. I can see Merritt's lips moving, but I can't hear anything.
I'm sorry. I'm back on. I thought maybe out the background noise. So I think that was great. I just want, if one or more of you could express, how is it that the differences of opinion and kind of tensions that sometimes creates in a community, what is it about that that's positive and even healthy? Because I think to a lot of people, the surface, it feels like something uncomfortable. So how would you express that? What is that? What is the importance or value of that? Is that kind of what you were saying?
Well, the importance of it is like, well, the Morningside neighborhood is, some of it is changing with the tear downs, but that is where the urban feel is. And then when you go on the west side of Edina, that's really suburban. The homes are still spread out much. And that's just a way organically how those neighborhoods have formulated. So I like to say that if I were to buy a house, I would like to move to Morningside because it just feels very comfortable and cozy and being able to walk through the neighborhood. So it kind of boils down to a personal preference. But the reality is the suburban and urban is a core part of our community makeup, and it has formed that. I don't know that we can erase it. People may not like to be referenced as urban, but not the entire city is urban. So.
I do want to point out that it's after 8. We're only on page 2 or something of a 39-page document, but I think this is to demonstrate what Merritt wants you all to do. So
Good.
I did a comment and then, try to capture some of the points you're saying. If you could each do that, I think that would be incredibly helpful to her because she can't read everyone's minds, and she wasn't here for the first year.
And even, I mean, it would be great if you just penned kind of your thoughts on what you want the report to capture. It can be full of typos and grammar issues, but just to give me a flavor of what you want to draw out, what you think is important, that would be terrific. Yeah, and we've only gone through a couple pages, but this really has helped get at what I think the kind of the most important thing is about the report. I mean, the technical stuff that we put in there is, that's important, but the tone, kind of the backdrop for all the technical information is what's tricky to figure out, and, everything else rises or falls based on it.
I also want to give a heads up that, when the goals and strategies, or the strategies in particular, were reviewed, some of them we may want to discuss reclassifying them as tools rather than strategies, but we're not going to do that today. It's going to happen through the course of drafting this, that we might have to revisit that. So MJ is not able to join us. She is in transit, but this has finishing the goals and the strategies and then reviewing this initial draft has brought up the issue of community engagement and what do you want to get from the community? What questions do you need them to help you answer? And what is the mechanism? And MJ will help with that, but the question was still remained, what is the role and the purpose of reaching out to the larger community and how will that help? What do you need them and what input do you need to help you move forward?
Stephanie, this is Norm. You know, I listening to our discussion this morning and in our previous discussions, I feel confident that, you know, the 7 of us on the task force, I think we broadly represent Edina, and we have a pretty good idea of the feelings of people in Edina. And so I think that we can provide enough input to this report and make sure it states things in a way that most people would pick up the report, read it, and say, yeah, I think that they have given a pretty balanced view and recommendations of where we should be going. But having said that, it would be even better if we had community input. And just the things that we have been talking about this morning probably underlines that. The whole idea of suburban and urban, there's probably lots of feelings out there among the residents of Edina. The quality of life, population growth, education, those are the reason that we identified those early on as community drivers is because I think people have strong feelings about that. The other items that were included in under the community drivers, I think those are also important, and those can would be suitable topics for getting community input and feedback. And then lastly, when we talked about land use regulation, we had a number of fairly specific recommendations that need to be fleshed out, but at some point in time, if we come up with specific recommendations, those are probably things that we should be making sure we're getting enough input from residents to make sure it's not just our opinions that we're writing about.
So do you think this would happen like after you draft something and have a community comment period on what you've drafted? Kind of like what they've done with the comp plan, where people can, I mean, with the comp plan, it was posted on Better Together. And then we got very detailed emails and responses, you know, section 2.3, whatever. And so some people would provide very detailed feedback. And then that was brought back to the Planning Commission and the consultants to like hash through on whether or not it was pie in the sky or left field or changes did need to be made. Do you think it's at that stage? Because this report, the draft, I want to say, I mean, not to, in addition to whatever happens, it will be reviewed by the HRRC, Human Rights Commission, and it will be reviewed by the Housing Foundation and the Planning Commission. So those are 3 volunteer bodies that will also be reviewing it and providing feedback, but we are thinking it could also be put on Better Together as a document like we did with the comp plan. But do you want something other than those mechanisms to go out and in what, and we'll work with MJ, but what format were you thinking that that should happen in? Or is that, I mean, because like land use stuff, the general public there's varying levels of understanding what land use regulations mean. The Planning Commission would be reviewing this though too. So I'm just trying to flesh out, I'm just trying to get what you're thinking.
I think that splitting lots is something that the general population can understand.
Yep.
I think accessory dwelling unit is something that the general population can understand. So those are just two examples I think that are people have feelings about and thoughts and preferences.
Norm, are you wanting to test sentiment on things in the report or strategies in the report that you think might be more controversial? Is that the intent?
I think it's testing how people feel about things that are really important. I don't know if they're controversial or not. I suspect that people, I think there'll be a broad range of opinions.
So then, so I'm hearing from you, I mean, Stephanie's just been asking about is the form of engagement getting people to react to the report, provide comments on it. It sounds a little bit like you are thinking broader than that it's not necessarily commenting on the report itself, but providing input on some of the types of topics that are in the report. In which case, if we do so, will that be to change the recommendations in the report? Will it be to frame and acknowledge that there's controversy? Or is it something you just want to reflect and acknowledge? How would you use it? How would you want to use it?
I think it would be to frame and acknowledge the input from the community. I think that we have a pretty good view of the things that are important to include in the report. So I wouldn't expect that any feedback we get would change the total direction of the report. But I think it would be important to show the preferences that we've been able to record, so that when someone reads the report, they might not agree with every recommendation in every detail. But my objective would be that they would look at it and say they've done a thorough job and they've tried to really understand where the residents of Edina are coming from. And to recognize that there's differences of opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Other people?
I would also like to, I'd like to add that it also can help us to craft the report where some areas may need more explanation or more detail. If people don't understand why this is happening or why this suggestion is made. And, you know, if somebody's still focused on why they bought their house in 1981 or 85, and they think the rest of the world's thinking that way, you can talk about that for an example, or that. So I just think it gives a chance to educate the public before it's a finished product, but it also can improve the product. How you do it, I don't know, especially with COVID, with the virus, I don't know the best technique, but Stephanie's suggestions sound reasonable to me.
Stephanie, you've been the one kind of talking to MJ and folks at the city that do more engagement. So is what you're hearing helpful, or are there other things you kind of want to draw out?
I think we're going to have some more conversation about whether or not with the tool to be used and how that information is gathered. In addition, if the additional tools from what have already been discussed. Because I still see it, and I have blinders. I mean, clearly, that if we put out a draft, and for what to Tom's point, if there's areas that need more explaining, we'll get comments like, "What does this mean? What are you talking about?" And then we flesh it out. I don't think that when we put it out there for review, we're considering that it is a fully final product at that time, but it will be clearly further along than it is now. That we'll bring it as far as we can bring it, and then we invite the community, we give them, 20 days to comment and ask questions, and then we revisit those questions and comments and flesh out where it needs to be fleshed out. So I still see that as an online mechanism. And so I struggle with what other means there would be for gathering that information. What other tools would be used to gather that information? A sidebar for anyone who's interested, I did post the goals and strategies on Better Together. And we put it in our Friday report that they're there. So, disseminating that word that those are there, and no one's commented. It's been 2 weeks, and that there hasn't been anyone that signed on to make any comments, but it may be that people don't know. And so getting the word out that that's there.
Yeah, just so you know, that was picked up by the Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing and circulated amongst that group. I don't think there was any request to provide any feedback. So I think it's just people acknowledging that the information is now available if people are interested in reading about it.
Right. There's an opportunity to provide feedback and ask questions.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a call out for that.
Right.
Stephanie,
Janet.
Yes, the Better Together is a very good tool for those of us who are engaged with what's happening at City Hall. The people who are not, I would just say, like from my corridor in the southeast of Edina, they have no idea. And even as we continue talking about community engagement, I really fear about that because there's just going to be a good section that is totally ignored. And that's not a fair representation of the community still. So,
Right. And that's the age question, is how to get people to be engaged who aren't engaged, and what are the best tools. And I think there's going to be a massive communication effort through Nextdoor and Facebook and Twitter and whatever. But even Facebook, it's only people that give a rip about City Hall that look at the Edina Facebook page.
Yeah.
I think that's true, but I want to say something about Better Together. I was on it the other day, and it was hard for me to figure out how you comment on it. I didn't think it was the most friendly website for adding comments compared to others. That might be by design or something, but I would use some other vehicles as well to get the information out. And I don't know whether Nextdoor is appropriate or the city can do that. But something that's easy to pick up and then comment on, you're going to get more feedback. You may not want all of it, but anyhow.
Okay, so my job then is I'm going to meet with I will send out a notice to the communications department and have us start really, and MJ, because she's our community outreach person. So I'll get the communications department, I'll talk to the marketing person, and I'll talk to MJ and have all of us meet and strategize how to get the word out better, you know, for when the time comes. So we have a plan in place to launch when the time comes.
Yeah, a general comment is, you know, kind of think of the person with not a great understanding of technology and not a great understanding of housing. And this is also in the report that a few times I thought it was more technical. And if you didn't have the background, you wouldn't understand what was always being said or done. So, you know, spell out stuff and just make it easy for the average person to, or even the below average person like me to follow.
I think this is a very, very difficult time, obviously, when we're dealing with COVID-19. When I think back to the comments that came in through Better Together on the comp plan, it's been a long time ago, but my impression was that most of the comments were tweaking the language as opposed to any substantive recommendations for changes to the direction of the comp plan.
You're right. I think most of the big, huge comments were via email.
And once the report was out there, then more of the comments were tweaking. The more important feedback would be through focus groups or through a statistically valid survey.
Right.
I don't know how to do that, but I think we have talked about a number of things this morning. I think there's going to be more things that we'll be talking about as we go through the report. And those are things that I think through a survey, we could get feedback. I think doing a focus group would be great. I don't know how to do that in a COVID-19 environment.
Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, we could do like a town hall. And the survey is on the table. The survey, the conundrum with the survey is, what are you asking? And what are you getting? What is the input? Because the questions that were raised before, and we talked about this, was what can you do with the information that you're going to get if it's widely varied or highly controversial? So some of the questions before, they weren't, I mean, it was really early, or not really early, but not thinking about it in the same way. So we would still need to know the answers that you're seeking. You know, is it, because you can't ask, like, which would you prefer, Edina, to remain suburban or become more urban? Because it's both already. So we'd just have to think about what is it that would be helpful to you. And so survey's an option, but to what end?
So maybe a good, I mean, there had been a set of questions put together before. Would it be helpful, Stephanie, if everybody on the task force was asked to submit just some ideas about what topic they would like addressed in engagement engagement that I would call proactive instead of reactive, where you're getting out in front of the report being released and commented on and doing something that's a little bit more anticipatory.
And Stephanie, in response to your question, can you ask, it wouldn't be appropriate to ask people, do they prefer a suburban environment or an urban environment?
Right.
But,
I mean, that seems facetious somewhat, but yes.
in one of the attachments that you had referred to, Merritt, in your report was from the National Association of Realtors, National Smart Growth And they asked survey questions there that would really get at the answer. How do people feel about a suburban environment or an urban environment? They didn't ask that question, but they asked a whole raft of questions that really give you the answers.
Yeah, Norm, let's share that link again. And perhaps we can put it in the folder for the next meeting, just so as people are looking at preparing for the next meeting, they can find that.
Or could you send it by an email for us that don't always do well with the folders? That list of questions that you talked about, Norm?
By the way, you can access that in the report that Merit put together. There's a number of links that she included on pages 7 and 8.
Okay, yes, that's right. I will send an email just highlighting that again.
Thank you.
Dan, you've been really quiet this meeting. Are you just waiting to tell us everything at the end, or?
It's a good listening day.
We can all learn from you. Sometimes it's best to listen.
Well, it wouldn't be much of a meeting if everyone acted like me.
All right.
All right. Well, it seems our next meeting is in 2 weeks. So since we're not meeting next week and you're used to this meeting every week, I think homework would be to really provide Merit with your thoughts, comments, impressions of the outline that she has prepared, things that you feel like need to be highlighted, or whatever your thoughts are. Anything and everything. There are no rules. I mean, be polite and kind and stuff like that, but you know, I think you already are. So go through that and just plop it all down. We will send you the link to that survey that Norm was mentioning. I didn't see it either. And there may be some questions on there that you think would be really helpful to do locally. And then also supply some other questions that you feel like after reviewing and commenting on her draft, that you really feel like you need a broader perspective to provide input. Does that make sense? So we'll go through that again in September, our next meeting in September. We're getting to October. At October, at least towards the end, we're really going to need to start, I'm going to start working on when we can meet with like the foundation, the HRRC, and getting on the calendar with the Planning Commission to have a work session with them to talk about where you're at and get some of their input and feedback as well.
So is your intent to get that feedback based on the draft report?
A more fleshed out draft than what we have, but yes.
So once we get to a fleshed out draft, we will submit it to them, and then we'll have some kind of follow-up meeting with each of those organizations, and they'll give us their reaction to the fleshed out draft.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to meet with them by the end of October, early November, because if they say, okay, you missed the vote on this, or this needs more explanation, or yeah, we really like this piece, then it gives time to discuss and mull, and I mean, Thanksgiving's in there, and to revisit some of those things before, because December is when you're going to need to present this to City Council.
Yep.
Even if it's the last meeting in December, it's still December, and we're in September right now. So, and that also goes with getting community input. I mean, if we're going to get broader community input, that would have to be in October and November, and then you have to take that information and figure out how to incorporate it.
Okay, got it.
The draft report that we have been talking about this morning, is that available to residents who might want to look at it?
It's too drafty. I mean, technically anything that I've seen is public, but it's kind of like the Maxfield study that went out before it was finalized, and then it got on Nextdoor, and then it got trashed because it wasn't a complete report. So I think at this stage it is really too drafty.
I would agree, because I don't think it reflects, I mean, first of all, there are sections that there aren't even content in. So I think it would just be confusing to people, and I think that the tone varies so much throughout it. I just think there's a lot of work to be done to get to something I'd actually call a draft, even.
Hey, Merit, on a technical issue, the problem I was having was I was trying to print the Word doc on a Mac, and now that I went through my work server and printed it, it prints fine. So it was my ignorance that was, so the document comes across fine. Good job.
Steve?
This probably relates back to the earlier discussion we were having about the report, but one of the issues that's been floating in the background is what was the methodology that the Met Council used to come up with the latest number of 1805? And I've been able to work with the Met Council statistical data analyst group, and I've got really detailed descriptions of how the numbers are put together for all of the cities. And I will provide people with a summary of that. It's very technical. There's a lot of math involved, but I think it's illuminating. And I think the underlying concepts are that the Met Council believes in the concept of every municipality should be pulling its weight equally in trying to address regional issues. So if there's a need for affordable housing, they would say every community should be providing their fair share of resolution of the issue of affordable housing. And with that as their basic premise, they then work through several different adjustments to the numbers, and I will detail how they go through all that for everybody and give you the links to the actual document so you can go through it if you're interested. But I think it's worth understanding the philosophical approach and then looking at the numbers.
And
That's essentially saying fair share is what's driving the numbers.
a document that you can send out, Steve?
I will send out first a summary document, and then I'll link it to the detailed documents.
Thanks.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Steve, does that break it down by submarkets or populations or groupings?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, like senior housing, people below 30%,
No,
people below 60, families, singles.
It does it by income, but it doesn't by type. So the senior versus family versus individual workforce, that would be more in the Maxfield study, but not in the numbers that we get from Met Council.
The Met Council looks strictly at affordable housing and does it by the three income categories that you're familiar with: below 30, 30 to 51, and 51 to 80.
Well, I think it would be helpful in a final report to say in 2020 dollars, this is what this means for people who aren't up on 80% of AMI. And if we can add subcategories as best we can, such as seniors, assisted living, housing for the disabled, families with children, I think it's more helpful than just throwing out a big number.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Tom. And one of the charges that we have from the City Council is to provide a comprehensive housing strategy that addresses more than just the affordable housing component. And so we're looking at all types of housing. And I think we've tried to do that in the past. But in any case, I just wanted to let you know that I've been able to get the information that several members of the task force have been asking for a while. And I'll send that out to everybody.
Thank you, Steve.
Steve,
Stephanie.
since you brought up the Metropolitan Council, I saw an article in the Star Tribune yesterday. I'll send it out to everybody in case you haven't seen it, but the Metropolitan Council has been criticized in the past for being an unelected body, assessing taxes and doing things beyond the scope that they were originally chartered for. And Governor Walz has has nominated a committee to oversee the Metropolitan Council and take an assessment of it. And Mayor Hovland is on that committee that was named by Governor Walz. I think it would anybody else be interested in asking Mayor Hovland to appear with us and talk about what his objectives are as part of that committee? I'll let you think about that.
About timing.
Send us the link and we'll have a chance to better understand.
Sure.
I have one more comment.
I think Janet was going to say something a moment ago. Janet, do you still
Sorry.
have before time?
Yes, yes. I was just going to ask, as long as we're talking about the Metropolitan Council, with the affordable housing units assigned to each municipality. Just in the community talking, I heard someone say that there was one time when we were not, as a city, was not making an effort towards affordable housing, and Metropolitan Council put a caveat that if you are not going to make an effort towards these numbers, then we're not going to build your sewer system, which is the part they control, the sewer system and water. Is that true? This is a question to Stephanie. Is that a tool the Metropolitan Council can use? But I just need to hear from you because I heard it from someone in the community.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? So I want to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
What?
Because there's some breaking out.
Okay.
Yeah, let me go ahead. Can I try Janet, since your voice is a little, the connection's kind of rough?
Okay.
She heard from someone that, you know, the Metropolitan Council wants to see everybody take their share, and that at some point they may have indicated that if a community isn't taking its share of, say, affordable units, then it could hold back on some of its services, like funding for, what was your example, Janet?
Sewer.
The sewer line.
Sewer line.
Yes.
So there's two things that get very confusing with the Met Council. One, and it has to do a part with how it's the terminology to the public. There are need numbers, and the need number is at 1804 because they did this whole calculation. They put in the sausage maker, they pulled out this number that says that for Edina, the need number, what we anticipate the need number for affordable housing is 1804. Then they have goal numbers. So goal numbers are the goal that they look at the funding that's available to create the affordable housing. They look at all the other variables in place that make affordable housing possible. And they realize that 1804 is very high because there's not enough money through Minnesota Housing, Hennepin County, Met Council, and the city to create 1804. So then they take out a portion thereof saying, okay, based on the funding availability and what tools that cities have to create affordable housing, we think it's a percentage of that 1804. And they do that across the board. They don't say like Shakopee, it's 34% of your goal, Minneapolis, it's 62% of your goal, Edina, it's whatever, because sources, they try to be equitable and say, okay, so here's your need number, and then your goal number is a certain percentage. Every year I have to do a report to the Met Council of what we have done to try to achieve our goal. And we have to allocate some of our own money. I always call it the Aloha, but that's not right. It's AHOLA, I think is the acronym, of how much money the city has spent towards the creation of affordable housing. And it's like this 10-page Excel workbook. And I have to fill in all these things. You get a score based on how you answer this report. Based on your score, they can say whether or not, and you're eligible to apply for LCDA, LHIA, TBRA funding. If you do really poorly, if you get a really low score, then when you send in an application for that funding, you're not eligible because you're not really doing anything towards the creation of, towards working towards your goal. In addition, in the next month, I have to get the city council to adopt the goal number. They have the need number comp plan goal number. And we have to talk about how we will try to achieve that goal number. And I have to get that approved by the city council. If I don't do that, not eligible for LCDA money. And I have to pass a fair housing policy, and we have to do other things in order to for those money. I have not heard anything of it being related to sewer and roads.
Okay.
Stephanie, I think,
yeah,
you know, we were talking at the very beginning, you know, how is Edina doing? It's meeting these regional, national trends compared to other communities. It seems like that score is a good indicator relative to other communities. Do you have that score number over time for Edina?
I can get it.
I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, our score a couple years ago went down. A couple years ago went down to a scary level, and then we brought it back up. So I think a couple years ago we were scrambling to try to figure out how to get to the minimum benchmark.
Well, that seems like a good story. Sorry.
Tom?
Yeah, I would, so the 1805 is the need, but then a realistic goal is something less. Is that what we're saying? And I think that's an important point to make because, you know, if you look at the 1805 number, that's kind of huge. And to acknowledge that there, without a huge commitment by the federal government that pours through the county and the state government, you're not going to get anywhere near 1805, especially when you're talking about people at very low incomes. So I think that needs to be acknowledged in the report that the city can't carry all the weight itself in developing it. They can certainly have the zoning, they can be agreeable, but you know, if the funds don't exist on a higher governmental level, it's not going to happen.
Right. And there's other ways. I mean, there's the funding and the cost cutting. So, I mean, I think that it's both sides. And there's been multiple conversations among city folk. And every city's situation is vastly different. So some cities really wanted the goal number to be the same as the need number, saying this is the need. We should try to achieve fulfilling the need. And other cities are like, we're going to fail. I know that, and I don't want to announce the community that we failed massively. So, I mean, it's a highly debated amongst the communities because they implement it the same way. Or Met Council provides the numbers the same way to the communities. it's a challenge on figuring out how to do
I
that.
mean, I want to be able to say we tried, but to help the people at say below 30% is just going to be almost nearly impossible on any large scale.
So, Stephanie, do you have the goal number for this year or last year?
I'd have to. I don't have it memorized. I'd have to get that for you.
If you could share that, I'm a little astonished that we were not aware that there was this goal number that was distinct from the need number until just now. So I'm
so the one in
intrigued.
the comp plan is the need number, and it's what's confusing is that it's stated in the comp plan as a goal, but technically, from the Met Council vernacular, it's a need number.
That's fine. But
So the goal number was not given to us until recently, and I'll get that for you. And it is a different number. And this year, for the first time, it's a range. In the past, it was like 45% of the need number was the goal, and this year it's a range.
okay, but what you're saying is you've had this number in the past as well. So there's this concept. There has been a goal and it's lower than the need.
Correct.
I agree with Tom that this is information that we should include in the report.
Okay.
Can we go back? I want to go back to Janet's question earlier, and I think this is the case. The Met Council has no authority to impose on any city that they build affordable units or change their zoning to allow more affordable units or change their building code to allow more affordable units. But they do have the authority to withhold grants to cities that apply for them if they don't meet certain qualifications. But the numbers aren't huge. It's not like a city would say, "Oh my God, if we don't do what the Met Council says, we're going to lose a significant amount of money." It's not a lot of money, therefore, there's not a lot of leverage for the Met Council to use against any individual city.
And and what Janet's saying, there may be something regarding that, but since I don't deal with sewers and roads, I may not. I don't know. I can't say definitively either way.
I would add that one thing I know that Met Council does, because I've worked for some communities on the urban fringe, is, when it's making decisions about next areas region to extend regional water and access to, it will not approve extensions unless those communities have a plan that shows that they have a level that they are doing the rezoning, whatever needed to accommodate new growth, that growth is of a certain density that they think justifies the infrastructure cost, and that they are planning to accommodate, like we talked, sort of their proportion of different types of housing and people based on regional need. So if you aren't willing to put together that plan, then they say the extension isn't justified, and then they will extend in communities that have provided that plan and are ready to grow. But they won't take it away.
Yep.
So we have Stephanie, I can see your writing. We have 7 minutes. I know we put down a lot of homework. Any last thoughts people have, or Stephanie, things you would like from people? From my perspective, this has been really helpful. And I really look forward to whatever people send me as far as ideas, suggestions, data they think that would be valuable and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm trying to find those goal numbers because I know I'm supposed to work on the staff report now.
Okay. Also, you know, as I'm making changes to the report, I will periodically update the document that I'm asking all of you to work on. So I will just be sure, let's all agree where the active report is that you can all contribute to at any time is. Should we have that in a meeting folder, or should we move it to the folder that's called reports and it's labeled something like current active draft or editable draft? What's easiest for people?
So I understand this. Are you proposing that there's a document that everyone's editing at will?
Right. I mean, I will always have a separate document that, you know, that's sort of a record of what there has been. But yes, there would be a document that everybody can provide comments in, and up in the top left corner, there's a little pencil, and you click on suggestions so that then every comment you put in, it says, you know, Dan or Janet. And then over time, we can go through and accept certain comments or.
Okay, so thus, from a week from now, there might be 150 comments from 7 people on it, and as a group, we can go through it and say, "Oh, good comment. Let's make a change here," or "No, we don't like that. Let's move on." And that's how the document would be edited.
Well, I will be taking some of the comments and information and doing my own writing to round out everything that you guys are putting in. And so that's what we need to figure out, what the smoothest way is to do that. But at least for this time period, let's have all of you just keep working on the 2 of 8 document. It's from this season.
Okay. So one more follow-up on it. So we've established earlier today, the document is not it's not showing up in the folder. There's only 2. When I look at it, there's just 2 documents in there.
Yeah. So
that's the first thing we have to solve.
So Stephanie, is there someone at your end that can help out with these Google folders?
Yeah, and I will try to, I mean, I was working on one today, so I'll save it as a Word document in my folder, and then I'll try to transfer and see if that works better.
Yeah, we want to make sure it's working though, because, you know, Dan's not even seeing it where other people are able to find it and open it. So, you know, what do we need to do? And if Google Docs doesn't work for everyone, you know, is there an alternative?
Yep.
And Merritt, if there are any significant large changes in a document that you put out, if you would send out an email notice, because we probably, all of us wouldn't be looking at the folder every day.
Yep. There are going to be certain days where I will spend a chunk of time, and then other days where I do nothing. So whenever I spend a chunk of time, I can send out a note and let you know.
Thank you.
What days do you do nothing? I find that hard to believe.
Well, I always do something, but I don't always do something that's billable. Yes, I'm a very restful person.
We have a folder now that's labeled Task Force Report. Should we be using that folder?
Sure. That's what I think would be easy instead of trying to remember what meeting we're in.
Yeah.
What's the folder, Steve?
It's called Task Force Report.
Oh, yeah. So right now I see one document in Task Force Report.
Right. There's only one there. We'd be moving the new document over to that folder.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. All right. I will go ahead and do that after we get off.
Okay.
And I'm gonna label it something really obvious, like current draft for editing, and then that's always what it'll be called, so that you guys know what to be working in.
Okay. So I have one more thought on this. You're not asking us to edit it. You're asking us to comment on it. The editing will come later.
Well, you can comment, but for instance, at some point in the meeting, Norm said something where he was suggesting rephrasing a sentence, and a lot of people liked it. I completely welcome that. So if people have actual text suggestions, maybe
But
a paragraph that they think.
Individually, those are comments we're making. You're not asking us to edit the document. You want comments so we can all look at the comments and decide what the edit will be.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Merit, can I ask you this? The document I sent you, did that work for you?
Yeah. That was exactly.
So
what
I don't
would
have
hope
to
it would look like.
redo that. I might add to it, but no. Okay.
Right. So that's probably the one I'll use and share with other people. And when you guys see it, you'll see, comment from Tom, comment from Yana, comment from Mary.
Good.
You can see who's commented.
Okay.
And the comments will look just like the one that Stephanie was adding during the course of this meeting, where we could see as she was writing, there was a comment showing up on the right-hand side.
Yep.
So a homework assignment then is you're going to send out the link to the document, and then each of us should be required to go in and verify that we can actually open it and edit, and make comments.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we'll let you know as soon as we fail.
Yeah. And hopefully Stephanie can find a Google Docs expert that can help us clear up any issues.
I want to say one thing. I really like what Janet and Merritt have done with their backgrounds.
So this is my background. I'm still at the cabin and it's cold, so I've had to move from the green porch into the living room. And Janet, I'm looking at yours and I'm trying to figure out if it's a big, beautiful picture you have or is that a background?
It's a background I picked from to kind of be just plain and look like I'm outside in the park.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Have a great trip.
Yeah, where are you going, Norm?
We're going hiking at the Rocky Mountain National Park.
Oh, fabulous.
Oh,
So I may not
That sounds
be
beautiful.
commenting until I come back.
Okay. That makes sense.
that sounds wonderful. Have fun.
Enjoy.
Thanks.